So with those housekeeping items out of the way, I think we'll go ahead and get started. And so just to give you a sense of who the voices are behind today's webinar, if we can move to the intro slide. These are the smiling faces that are virtually with you today. My name is Lindsay. I lead corporate water stewardship for World Wildlife Fund in the United States. That's all of our private sector engagement here domestically. We began our partnership with Ceres a few years ago around the AgWater Challenge, which will be the focus of our conversation today, but do a significant amount of work with US-based food and beverage companies, both here at home and around the world. But really looking forward to the discussion today, and I'll let Eliza introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Eliza Roberts. I work at Ceres. For those of you who are not familiar with Ceres, we're a Boston-based nonprofit working to tackle some of the world's biggest sustainability challenges, from water to climate change to human rights abuses. And our mission is to really transform the economy to build a sustainable future for people and the planet. So I lead our agricultural water risk program here at Ceres. I've been with the organization for about 4 years, and most of my days are spent engaging with food companies, helping them to understand the water risks they're exposed to and to most effectively respond to those. I also do a lot of research and education with investors on these issues as well. And I co-authored our 2015 and 2017 Feeding Ourselves Thirsty ranking, where we look at how the largest food sector companies are responding to water challenges across their governance, operations, and supply chain. And I also just want to reiterate that it's really great to chat with all of you today. I remember when Lindsay and I first had conversations in 2015 about starting this thing called the AgWater Challenge, and we had no idea how much interest there would be or whether it would actually come to fruition. And so it's really exciting that we're about to launch our second one in 2018. So thank you so much for joining us.
Great, and I'll just mention that while Eliza and I are the ones here on the phone with you today, we've got some really dedicated team members that are a part of this as well. And so we do draw on a team of experts inside World Wildlife Fund and inside Ceres to help create as much value and as much strength in the work that we do here together through the challenge as possible. So definitely a nod to all of our partners inside and beyond that are working on AgWater Nexus issues. Okay, so let's get right into it. When we talk about the AgWater Challenge, at its core, it is an initiative with kind of the key food and beverage companies, predominantly in the US, but in some cases more broadly, to highlight leadership and encourage new and improved sustainable sourcing commitments that address water risk with greater transparency. So when we think about this initiative and we put this in the context of very complex sustainability issues and agendas that are out there, we also feel like it's important to answer the question about why now. So just to give you a sense of what we saw from the first launch of the AgWater Challenge, I think indicates the power and strength of this effort and platform. So when we brought companies together in the first go-round in 2016 to look at how to create stronger sourcing commitments that integrate and address water risk, we had 7 inaugural companies that were recognized through that initial part of the challenge. They represented over $123 billion in annual net revenue, and together made over 18 new commitments. And so we're really proud of that initial showing, and are excited to have a really great group of companies that have stepped up with us and really acknowledged the importance and the urgency of doing the hard work to address ag water issues in an integrated way. Just to kind of dive a little bit deeper into those aspects of urgency. Agriculture is tough on water. Today, 1/3 of the world's agriculture production is grown in areas of high water stress or competition. It's exposed to more frequent and intense droughts and floods, and that has devastating impacts on harvests. And we also see more stringent water regulations being imposed as a result in growing regions. In addition, it's impossible to ignore the fact that companies need water to grow these critical ingredients for their supply chains. As we see some of these intense challenges around extreme events and mismanagement of water manifest, those risks are increasing, and we're seeing greater attention turned towards water in the form of more investor questions as well as consumer questions. This is a common fact that's stated, but I think it's worth saying again. Water is now repeatedly one of the top global risks in terms of impact on the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report. It's not something that's going away. If you look at some of the stats on the slide in front of us, there are big issues having big material impacts that emanate from water. And so it's really at the heart of addressing these issues. And while that's certainly the case, the sustainability landscape is really complex and challenging, and oftentimes because water is part of global sustainability agendas, it manifests locally, and that can make it really hard to get your arms around it and understand where to begin. And I think in this regard, sometimes it gets left out or is siloed in a way that doesn't allow companies to really realize the potential for co-benefits of addressing water that's integrated and able to help support work in the areas of waste and climate change, all of the major sustainability issues that people are grappling with. Water flows through them and can be a key part of that. Eliza mentioned the Feeding Ourselves Thirsty report, and I think, based off the incredible research that they've done, we're seeing good movement on water, but oftentimes, because of the urgencies of these issues, we ask ourselves the question, is what is being done aggressive enough? Is it enough to really meet the challenges and the risks that you face in your business? There's definitely some issues and areas that are lagging behind others. So whether that's wastewater discharge and how that's being addressed, whether it's certain parts of industries that are having a harder time addressing water, whether that's areas of the meat products industry or agriculture products, or just not understanding very well the strides that they are making. I think the AgWater Challenge is a platform that really allows companies to understand not only how to be more aggressive, but also how to be more transparent and public about the great work that you are doing that people need to know about and need to be learning from. So I think there's great potential that we've seen off the back of the 2016 challenge, and we are super, super excited to be embarking on the 2018 challenge. So just to lay out for you guys what we're looking at for the conversation today is, coming out of this webinar, we want you to really understand and have a good grasp of the key aspects of the initiative. We want to be able to address some of those fundamental questions that you may have and make the connection to us so that if you have follow-up questions, you have an easy place to go to get those answered. And then we'll give you and leave you with a clear sense of what the next steps are. So how we've structured the dialogue, the webinar today, is to dive deep into the overview of the challenge and the benefits that it offers to companies, give you a bit of a deep dive on what we have come to call the 5 key ingredients of the AgWater Challenge. That's the backbone and framework of the work that we will be doing over the course of the next 7 months with a selection of companies. We'll break then for some Q&A, and then we'll talk a little bit about how this initiative aligns with others. and go over the timeline, how we collect data, and talk about setting new and stronger commitments with companies, and then review those next steps. And then there'll be another chance for question and answer at that point. So that's the basic setup for today. I'm going to hand it over to Eliza now, and she's going to take you into the heart of the challenge.
To the 5 ingredients. We keep referring to the 5 ingredients. So ultimately, Lindsay was speaking to this a bit, that water is really complex. Water is very local in nature. It's very challenging to just come up with one goal to address water challenges that you're facing within your company. And then when you add in the agricultural supply chain, it gets even more complicated. So what we really wanted to do was to come up with a really clear way for companies to understand a few things that they can do. So 5 ingredients seemed the simplest way to do it. It's ultimately the roadmap for the AgWater challenge. The first piece, of course, assessing water risks. The next, developing sustainable agriculture policies. Then we've got time-bound goals, collaborating at the watershed level, and the 5th, and I wouldn't say most important because we think they're all important, but engaging with growers to ensure that they're really a part of it. So I'll dig more into this in a moment, but for now, just wanted to introduce this and let you guys know that these ingredients ultimately came from the Feeding Ourselves Thirsty framework, where we scored companies against a range of different categories. The agricultural supply chain, of course, is a really important piece of it, given that that's where a bulk of the water use and risk lies. And so it's really grounded in that framework. And again, we'll dig more into it and give you some examples of the types of commitments that we're hoping companies will make and the types of commitments that companies made in the 2016 AgWater Challenge. But first, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the benefits to participants for joining the AgWater Challenge. So one of the first pieces is that it's an opportunity to work with WWF and Ceres and receive some technical assistance for free. There's no cost to joining the challenge, to really look at where you are in your water stewardship journey and what makes the most sense based on where you are and the 5 different ingredients that we're putting forward. There are also lots of opportunities to participate in peer-to-peer learning. So there will be webinars on storytelling. There may be dinners linked to different events, opportunities to come together with other peers in the space to find out what some of their challenges are, what some of the successes are that they've seen. Of course, companies that do participate and decide to make commitments will then formally be recognized as AgWater stewards when the commitments are announced in late summer of 2018. There will also be opportunities to get insight from communications experts, both from Ceres and WWF, but also from external firm that we're going to be working with as a part of the AgWater Challenge, to get some insight on how to more effectively tell your sustainability story, specifically linked to agriculture and water. And then last but not least, there's opportunities through new commitments that are made to improve your performance in the next Feeding Ourselves Thirsty ranking, which will be released in 2019. So the way the AgWater Challenge works is companies will look at the 5 ingredients with companies. There are 45 maximum points that are in the AgWater Challenge ingredients. Companies need to make commitments that add up to a total of 15 points, a minimum of 15 points out of these 45 points in order to be recognized as an AgWater steward. Lindsay will show some screenshots at the end of what the 5 ingredient survey looks like, but we've tried to streamline it and make it easy for everybody so you can understand what some of these expectations are. But before I dig into those ingredients, I just want to look a little bit at what success looks like both for Ceres and for WWF, but also for the companies that choose to participate in the challenge. So for Ceres and WWF, ultimately, we recognize that water challenges across the world are huge. There are tremendous challenges we're facing linked to water scarcity and pollution throughout the globe. And because food companies require so much water to grow the food that we eat, there's a tremendous opportunity for these companies to step up and to make some new commitments to help protect fresh water at the field level. And so our goal and what success looks like for us is to really work with companies to help develop commitments that will truly have an impact at the field level. When companies step up and establish themselves as leaders, this helps to send a signal to others in the sector that they should also follow suit. And then we can see more CEOs, C-suite leaders, senior executives stepping up, talking about agriculture and water and the challenges they're seeing, so that this isn't just an issue that some are talking about, but that everyone really is getting it the attention that it deserves. For companies, there are a lot of opportunities to be recognized for stepping up and being leaders and making these commitments, opportunities to highlight stories of action on the ground, and then, of course, really ensure that you are meaningfully addressing the material water risks that you're facing in your agricultural supply chain. So now I'm going to dig in a little bit to the 5 different ingredients that we're seeing, that we're looking at. So the first one, assessing water risks. This is really key. There are a lot of companies that have begun to evaluate water risks that they're exposed to in their direct operations. There are many who have then taken it further and evaluated in their agricultural supply chain, but many really haven't done it to the level that we'd like to see. And it's ultimately like building the foundation of a house. And a lot of companies will then set commitments without having first done this. So this is one key piece where we're hoping that companies that haven't done this will make this one of the key ingredients that they get credit for. So some examples of the types of commitments that companies made in the first AgWater challenge. Sorry, I'm having trouble with the slides here. Here we go. So General Mills is a really great example of a risk assessment that's been completed. In 2016, they did a risk assessment of their critical watersheds, addressing 15 key ingredients in 36 sourcing regions, including 66 facilities, which also included their supplier partners. And this covered about 41 watersheds globally. They used a lot of different data sources, including WRI's Aqueduct and the World Wildlife Fund's water risk filter. And then from that, they've really dug in to identify 8 priority high-risk watersheds that they want to do more in-depth assessments of and to really engage in moving forward. As a part of the 2016 AgWater Challenge, Hormel also committed to completing a high-level water risk assessment for largest direct suppliers, for contract growers, and for key agricultural inputs produced in high-risk regions. So the second ingredient is focused on sustainable agriculture policies. Obviously, a policy really is only as good as its implementation. So there are 2 different pieces to this. There's companies developing a policy that references water and talks about the key pieces of agricultural water stewardship as well, and defines sustainable agricultural sourcing. We also want to make sure that the scope of this policy includes not just stakeholders, but also key suppliers, and that it really is integrated into the procurement process. So an example here of a sustainable agriculture policy that was made as a part of the 2016 AgWater Challenge includes Hormel. So in April, they released a sustainable agriculture policy that requires all direct suppliers, contract animal growers, and feed grain growers to meet best practices for reducing water pollution risks. And then there's also a piece linked to storage, transport, and application of manure as well. And it included all of the goals that they had set as a part of the AgWater Challenge. The Diageo Water Blueprint is another great example. This is a blueprint that Diageo released in late 2015 that defines the company's strategic approach to water stewardship. And this approach is based on 4 core areas, including raw material sourcing, operations, communities where they operate, and local and global advocacy for best practice in water stewardship. So for the third ingredient, this is very much focused on time-bound goals, which is a really important piece of this. I'm sure many of you have either developed goals on your teams and for your companies, but then also seen many of these being set, sustainable sourcing goals being set by food companies. And a lot of the recent ones have been focused on, we will source a majority of our key ag input sustainably by a certain year. So Kellogg's has one, General Mills, a number of others. But I just want to point out here that we recognize that the time-bound goals that a company is going to set really are going to vary depending on how your company is structured. And for some companies, it may make sense to establish, a variety of commitments that apply to a variety of different key agricultural inputs. But in some cases, if you're a meat company, for example, it may make sense to dig in more and focus just on feed and look at corn and soy, and come up with some sort of acreage goal where you commit to enrolling a certain number of acres into a fertilizer optimization program with a goal to reduce fertilizer application within key regions by a certain year. Or maybe if you're a part of field to market already, there's an opportunity to set a goal to enroll a certain number of acres of at-risk commodities into field print projects. So lots of different types of goals here, and we do spell these out in the survey that we'll be sharing with folks who are interested later. I just don't want to overwhelm all of you guys with way too much information here. But another really great goal that PepsiCo made as a part of the 2016 AgWater Challenge was to improve the water use efficiency of their direct agricultural supply chain by 15%, with an emphasis on high water risk regions. So for the fourth ingredient, this is all about collaborating with others at the watershed level. I think we all know that we can address water challenges by working with growers to reduce water use. But the challenge with just doing that is that you may not necessarily be addressing the risks that you and others are exposed to in a specific watershed if the water saved is simply used by someone else, by some other stakeholder or some other industry. And so what we're really looking for here is for companies to dig in and identify opportunities to collaborate and work together to address shared challenges in watersheds that really line up with, often there's a lot of alignment between the watersheds that are priority watersheds for many different food companies. And so another key part of this, in addition to that collective action at the watershed level, is for companies to engage more in the policy conversation, to really leverage the voice that companies have with their strong brands to advocate for policy change to help ensure that water is conserved, recycled, reused, and managed properly. And so an interesting example from the 2016 AgWater Challenge was that there are a few different companies, including formerly White Wave, now Danone Wave, and PepsiCo, who committed to joining Connect the Drops, which is a program in California for companies with a large footprint in the state, really working with them to help leverage the voice that they have to help conserve water in the state of California and protect water resources, be a part of the policy conversation, sign on to letters, et cetera. So that was a great example that we were excited about, but lots of different opportunities in this specific ingredient. And the last ingredient, bear with me, I know this is a lot, but we'll follow up with more information to make it a little bit more digestible. But this last one is all about engaging with growers and providing them with the educational support and the financial incentives they need to help companies ensure that they truly are meeting any time-bound sustainable sourcing goals that have been set. And so here you'll see an example of a type of goal that we'd really love to see. We did see in Feeding Ourselves Thirsty that there were a lot more companies that are providing this educational support to growers, and are hearing from many companies who recognize that they really do need this support in order to meet their goals. But a lot of the examples that we've seen really aren't at scale, and so we're hoping to see some great examples here that are time-bound, measurable, and really help to ensure that growers are getting the educational resources and support that they need. And another piece of this are financial incentives, and there's always a big question of who's going to pay for it. And I think a lot of companies think of that as providing direct payments directly to farmers. And I just want to point out here that there's a lot of other opportunities for innovative financing mechanisms that aren't just directly linked to paying more money to growers for per crop of products. And I think some examples of that include extended contracts. So instead of a 1-year contract, it's a 3-year contract if you improve your practices, or providing free technologies to growers to test out to see if it's going to help them improve their practices and if they really want to invest in it, or providing them with low or no interest loans. So lots of different opportunities here. And the one that I wanted to highlight from the 2016 AgWater Challenge is Kellogg's, because they're doing a really great job of disclosing the number of growers that they are reaching and how they are engaging with those growers on a range of different issues, including water. So they've got a number of different projects, from their Louisiana Master Growing Program to their Thai rice project to work with potato suppliers in Bangladesh. So I just threw quite a lot of information at all of you. I hope that gives you a taste of what the 5 ingredients are and the different types of commitments that we're hoping to see as a part of the challenge. We do have this great document that will walk through it in more depth, but I'll leave it at that for now. And now we do have a moment for some questions. So if you do have any questions, please do feel free to put those in the chat box on the left of your screen, or if you only called in via phone, you can unmute yourself by pressing *7 and then mute yourself again by pressing *6. But in the meantime, I do have a few questions that have been shared thus far that I can start with while folks start typing in those questions. So one question is about, okay, let's see. Oh, it's a question about time-bound goals. Do we expect it to cover all the commodities versus some? So that's a great question. I think it really depends on the company and where you are. I think in some examples, we really want them to be time-bound and measurable commitments and to really get at the risks that you're exposed to. And so we're open to some different types of goals depending on how your company is structured and where the biggest risks are that you're facing. Looks like another question just came through. And Lindsay, I can pass this one on to you. So this question is, do all AgWater Challenge participants have to set goals?
Yeah, definitely. Good question. In this year's challenge, in order to be recognized, we are asking all participants to set commitments that can reach that minimum 15-point threshold. So for recognition, that will be a requirement. But again, I feel like engaging in the dialogues, participating in the challenge to get more information about, what that would take, having those initial conversations is a worthwhile first step. So even if you're not sure if you could, reach that threshold or make those goals, but still have some interest in learning more about, what that might take, we're really happy to set up a call and have those conversations with you to help you understand, where we see the opportunities based on where you are, where you want to go, and maybe some things that you haven't thought of that would be a good addition to some of your thinking around future commitments. So definitely reach out to us, and we're happy to help you think through what those goals might look like, and if the timing of the challenge aligns with that nicely.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. So there are two more here that I'll speak to, and then if people have other questions, feel free to continue to send those in, and we can address them at the end. But one of them is about challenges and concerns with sharing proprietary information. We've definitely gotten that one before, and I think, any information that, obviously it does help to share some information that may be proprietary so that we can really help identify what the risks are that you're exposed to and how to most effectively respond to them. But, that information would just stay within Ceres and WWF. We would not share anything publicly. The commitments would need to be shared publicly, but all of the proprietary information that goes along with it would not need to be. And if there was a desire to sign some sort of MOU or agreement, we'd be open to doing that if that was a concern. And then the other question is about whether or not other companies or stakeholders will know if they begin conversations with us, but then decide, the timing isn't going to work, or we're just not going to be able to join the challenge for one reason or another. And that's a really great question. I think there were a number of companies last time. Lindsay spoke to the 7 companies that were recognized as AgWater stewards last time in the 18 or so commitments. There were some, like a dozen or more companies that we spoke with and had a number of conversations with about joining the challenge, began to evaluate where they are and what types of commitments they could make, and then for one reason or another, it just didn't quite work out. So, that's totally fine. If you want to have a conversation and talk about it and consider it, and then you realize that it's not going to work, then, hey, we just had a conversation, and that's completely fine. So don't worry about that. And no information would be shared with anybody outside of the organization about a company that chose to not participate or move forward with the challenge. We will only talk about the companies that decide to make commitments, and then those that we formally launched in the summer of 2018.
Hey, Eliza, just on that note, I'll also just mention to those of you on the call that we got quite a bit of feedback from folks that, had those initial conversations, even when the timing wasn't going to work out, that just based on the conversations and getting, a little more information, the checklist, now this year we have a more robust survey, but that's a framework that even though they weren't going to be formal participants in the challenge, that they really wanted to leverage the 5 ingredients, the steps, the approach, and that was something that they were going to take back into their efforts as they continued to work forward. So that's another thing that I would, just emphasize is, engaging with the challenge, in this, first few months, even if it doesn't lead to participation, offers you the chance to really understand the framework better and apply that into your own thinking, because we've heard from several companies that they've derived a lot of value from just the framework itself.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. That's a great point. And there is one more question, and then we can keep rolling with the presentation. Can companies join as a group, or does it have to be an individual? That's a great question. I don't know if the person who posed that is thinking about, suppliers joining with a brand, or if it's, other peer companies joining together. I think we're definitely open to something like that. And, if we could get some commitments where food sector companies decide to engage collectively in a watershed, and their commitment is a shared one, that would be really neat. And I think that would be a really great story for reporters in particular. So we're definitely open to that, and please do let us know if you want to connect more on that. So with that, if you do have additional questions, please do continue to share them in the box and or follow up with us afterwards. But for now, I'm going to pass it back to Lindsay, who's going to chat a little bit more about some of the next steps and the timeline and how this initiative aligns with other NGOs and initiatives and platforms in the space. So take it away, Lindsay. Lindsay, I'm not quite hearing you. I don't know if you're on mute.
I took myself off mute and then immediately put myself back on mute. Sorry. Okay, so you guys can go ahead and move me along to the next slide. One of the things that we talked about at the front end of this webinar was the complex nature of the sustainability landscape, and I'm sure there's lots of nodding heads, those of you that are participating, and I think that is also kind of shown through this slide itself, that there's a lot going on out there. What I want to emphasize is that when we launched the AgWater Challenge in 2016, we really tried to be deliberate about understanding where this initiative fit and how it could help connect to and support other work that's happening within this space. So if you think about the trajectory of the 5 ingredients, that they're based on some really core water stewardship principles. We haven't looked to modify or change those, but actually build from some key principles established through the Alliance for Water Stewardship, International Standard Framework, and the CEO Water Mandate. Using that becomes kind of the basis for how we then move through the 5 steps of risk assessment, sustainable ag policies, time-bound goals, watershed action, and producer support. Within those 3 areas, there's a lot of really great either tools or initiatives that can be a good reference or asset in your work to either develop a good, strong commitment or make progress against certain commitments. So in the risk assessment space, we know that there's, emerging a handful of tools that are reputable and well-tested amongst food and beverage companies for this type of growing region risk work. So we've listed those here. We talked to many of these folks, these tool providers, and so are really trying to align and help connect in to those efforts. Similarly, there's a lot of really great frameworks and efforts out there in terms of setting up policies and frameworks that integrate ag and water effectively. So the Sustainable Development Goals are a natural starting point for us, thinking about Goal 6, but also how that links into many of the other SDGs. As well, we referenced the fact that, it's very hard to pull water apart from climate. So as people are looking at setting science-based targets, as those climate targets are getting more ambitious and aggressive, it's going to require probably more investigation and work at that field farm level. How can you achieve some of these co-benefits? Because one of my favorite quotes is, climate change is a shark, then water is its teeth. So as you address those commitments, there's an opportunity to also address water. And then some broad initiatives too, like the Business Alliance for Water and Climate, BAFWAC, one of the craziest acronyms. But if you make commitments through the AgWater Challenge, it's very likely that it'll satisfy a lot of the commitments associated with that. So we're looking for that alignment as we help you navigate this complex landscape as it relates to ag and water. As we get into the heart of the key steps, 3, 4, and 5, there's lots of good, strong commodity standards that we've evaluated within WWF to understand, how strong they are on water. And so we can provide some good insights there. There's great platforms that are operating in watersheds. There's great NGO partners that you're probably already working with. How can that work lead to new, strong commitments? So, if you want to bring those things to the table and ask those questions, we are ready to sit down with you and figure out how that aligns and fits in with the AgWater Challenge. And then from there, reporting through traditional channels. There's no additional reporting requirements associated with the challenge. All we ask is that, whatever you're putting out there as a commitment, that you tell people about the progress and the achievements, the milestones that you've reached through the regular channels that you already use, whether that's CDP water disclosure, your annual sustainability report, whatever that may be. Get it out there, help people understand your journey. So I hope that helps clarify our approach within this complex landscape. But again, really trying to make this difficult, messy landscape a little bit simpler through the challenge work. Next slide. In terms of a provisional timeline for the challenge, basically what we're looking at as initial timeline is that we're hoping to have an initial cohort for the 2018 challenge set and confirmed by mid to late April, and to have initial company draft commitments pretty well in place by the end of the summer. Usually within the challenge, we are looking for a launch that happens in early to mid-fall. Right now, we are investigating what the right hooks might be for that launch period. So that's in development. So what we found in the 2016 challenge was that developing those draft commitments and really moving that through kind of the communications process of packaging those, understanding what stories could help tell and exemplify the power and impact of those commitments takes time. So within the AgWater Challenge, we do kind of move aggressively, but we have been able to leverage a lot of the learnings and work that was done in 2016. So hopefully what we'll be bringing to you this year is a much more streamlined and easy process to engage in. But you can see down along the bottom, there's several events that we're targeting this year for activation. Many of you are probably already planning to be at these events. So these will be opportunities for us to bring together our AgWater participants, have side conversations, get some work done, and also, as stories and opportunities come to the fore, that we can tell and share around progress from the first cohort or even from the second cohort. Those will be points where we can either discuss that or share that more broadly. So that's what the timeline is looking like so far. Eliza, I'm just going to pause here and see if you have anything to add on this.
No, I think that covers it pretty well. I would just say that if you're looking at this timeline and think, oh my gosh, this looks so ambitious, there's no way I can make this happen. There's some flexibility with the with the formal launch, and we're trying to figure that out, as Lindsay said, and so we'll have more information on that shortly. So don't let that completely scare you away, and we're happy to talk on the phone and chat more about what we're thinking there. So yeah, that's all. Thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah, and I'll just say 2016 had an even more aggressive timeline, and like Eliza said, we had a good, strong cohort that year with 7 companies that made it through. So it can be done, and we've got some good experience in that space. Next slide.
Oh, one more thing, Lindsay, that I wanted to add, I forgot, was that we recognize that because it is ambitious, we want to do our best to make it as simple for everybody as possible. And so, we do have a bunch of data from Feeding Ourselves Thirsty already. So we're going to try to pre-populate the survey with some of that to try to make your lives easier and make it so that we can just move on forward without having to slow down and answer some of the basic questions that we've already touched on and researched. So just wanted to put that out there. So now, Lindsay, go ahead, take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks for that final point. It's a great lead-in to the next slide, actually. One of those ways that we've really tried to streamline is through the development of a much more cohesive, easy-to-use survey of sorts. So this is just an Excel workbook that has, all of the instructions for you on the first tab, then captures basic company information on the second tab. And what we found is that this is just a great way for us to understand, key contacts, communication contacts, basic stats around the company as we think about how to talk about those that come forward with commitments in as a group that can provide us with, more common metrics that roll up that really speak to the power of the challenge platform. But as Eliza said, we're doing a lot of work to pre-populate what we know so that for you, it's just a check that you have to do. So hopefully that'll make things easier. And then the third tab is essentially running you through the 5 ingredients and allowing you to share with us information that you have around your plans that align to the different indicators we've laid out within the 5 key ingredients. Any first cohort AgWater steward that looks at this new ingredient survey will tell you it is much more streamlined and more clear. So those that came before you are paving the way and making the path, I think, a little bit easier because we really did take a hard look at the survey to make that easier and incorporate as much feedback from the first company cohort as possible. And then finally, one thing that can be a challenge, just on the last slide, sorry, is definitions and what do you mean when you say X, Y, or Z. And so that survey does include a glossary tab so that we spell out for you exactly what we're talking about and what we mean by certain terms. So know that all of that will be there for you in a nice, strong package. So as we look to the future and the next steps for the 2018 challenge, we will definitely circulate this webinar recording to those of you that are participating today. In addition, the FAQs that are coming through, if we're not able to get to all of them or if we receive some afterwards, we'll package all of those up and send back to you kind of the responses to all those questions so that you have that kind of resource in your toolkit. And then we're asking that companies register their interest with us via email and schedule a follow-up call. So that's the next step on the side of the participants in this webinar. Our target is April 21st to have received that register of interest from companies. Again, this doesn't mean that you're signing on to commitments, but that you are going to participate in the challenge and work towards that, towards putting forward new and strengthened commitments. We'll also share with those of you that express that interest, the AgWater Challenge survey that I just walked through, and let you know about any upcoming events and webinars so that as plans around the Ceres conference in April get confirmed and actions and activities at Sustainable Brands come forward, and any blog posts or communications opportunities that will be associated with the challenge, we'll keep you looped in on all that's going on there. And then again, that formal interest we are hoping to have by April 21st. So those are the immediate next steps. And at this point, we'll open the floor back up to any remaining questions that you all have. Eliza and my contact information via email is here on the slide for you. So we welcome any and all feedback that you all have. Thanks so much.
Great. And while we're waiting to see if folks have any more questions, again, feel free to just type those into the box or just send them directly to Lindsay and or myself if you want to do that after the fact. There is one additional question that's come through while Lindsay was chatting, and it's about staff support from companies and how much support is needed from program sustainability staff versus comms team support, which is a great question. And honestly, I think the answer to that is that it really depends on the company. There were some companies that have much smaller sustainability teams and are much newer to this space, and they didn't have a lot of comm support. They didn't have a point person on the comm side to help them, and so they were really leading a lot more on that, and then leaning on WWF and Ceres to help tell that story to reporters and share a communications toolkit with them. But then there are other examples where companies do have really strong communications teams, and those folks were joining calls in the last few months before we formally announced those commitments, doing brainstorming sessions about how we can do some really great storytelling, what sorts of metrics we can be rolling up, how we can most effectively leverage social media and different things like that. So really runs the gamut and depends so much on your company and the capacity that you and your team have. So I'm not seeing any other questions at the moment. Lindsay or my colleagues, are you guys seeing anything that we should answer, or should we just let people follow up and give everybody the gift of time, 10 whole minutes? Okay, I'm going to call that a wrap. Thank you guys so much for joining this webinar today. We hope that this was informative and helpful and answered all the questions you have about the AgWater Challenge and also got you excited about it. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us with any and all questions after this, and we'll be following up with everyone, sharing more information about the survey and some fact sheets and things like that. But please do know that we're here and excited to be a resource for all of you. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.